He sat beneath the crumbling awning of an abandoned convenience store, his back pressed against cold brick, a threadbare coat wrapped tightly around his frail frame. His name was James. He was 54 years old, a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan, and for the past 6 years, he'd been homeless. Most days blended into the next. Cold mornings, aching limbs, the dull pangs of hunger gnawing at his stomach. The city bustled around him, indifferent to his existence. People passed him by, eyes averted, as if his presence was too uncomfortable to acknowledge. He wasn't always like this. Once he wore crisp uniforms, stood tall with pride, saluted flagpoles with reverence. But war had a way of changing things, not just the body. Though his knees reminded him every day of the shrapnel that kissed them, but the mind, too. PTSD, they called it. Sleepless nights, violent flashbacks, fear in the silence. When he came home, nothing felt like home. He tried holding jobs, but the noise of the city brought memories he tried to bury. Employers didn't understand. Friends disappeared. Family drifted away. The government checks helped for a while, but then the rent rose and the support waned, and James found himself one step behind the bills until the eviction notice came. Then came the streets. He had learned to survive. Shelters when there was space. A meal from the church on Thursdays. He picked odd jobs when he could. Unloading crates, washing dishes in the back of diners. But nothing stable, nothing lasting. And then winter came. The worst one in a decade. Ice formed on sidewalks like glass, and the wind cut through layers like blades. That morning, James had woken with his fingers numb, barely able to feel them. He didn't think he could do another night out here. He stared at the sky, gray and endless, wondering if this would be it. If he would fade away into the city unnoticed. That's when he heard it, a faint whimper. He thought he imagined it at first. Then again, a soft cry, desperate and weak. He looked around and saw a small shadow emerge from behind the dumpster. It was a dog, skinny, matted, with patches of fur missing. Its ribs showed through its filthy coat, and it limped slightly as it approached him, tail low but wagging faintly. James sat still. He hadn't interacted with a dog in years, but something in the creature's eyes, that mix of fear and hope, mirrored his own. "Hey, buddy," James whispered, voice cracked from cold and silence. The dog flinched, but didn't run. It edged closer, sniffed the air, and then, with surprising trust, rested its head on James's knee. For the first time in months, James felt warmth, not from the contact, but from the connection. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out half a granola bar he'd been saving. He broke it in half and offered it to the dog. It devoured it eagerly. "You're hungrier than me," James chuckled, a rare smile breaking across his face. He named the dog Shadow. That night, they huddled together beneath the awning, sharing what little body heat they had. James wrapped his coat around both of them. It was the first time he slept without waking from nightmares. In the days that followed, they became inseparable. Shadow followed James everywhere, to the soup kitchen, to the corner where he panhandled, to the public library where he read old paperbacks to escape. People noticed. A few more coins dropped into his cup. A kind woman gave Shadow a blanket. A man handed him dog food. For some reason, the presence of the dog made James more human in their eyes, but it wasn't just the world that changed. James changed. He had someone to care for now. He found himself scavenging not just for his own meals, but for Shadow's. He saved scraps. He asked for help when Shadow limped again. One day, he met a volunteer named Erica at a community center. She noticed the way James fussed over Shadow, how gentle he was, how attentive. She struck up a conversation, and he found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He told her about his time in the military, about his fall, about Shadow. She listened without judgment. She told him about a veteran outreach program she volunteered for, one that helped homeless vets find work and housing. James was hesitant. He'd tried before, but she insisted. She set up a meeting. The program was run by other veterans. They understood. They didn't just hand him forms. They sat with him. They heard his story. They got him a medical checkup. Shadow got one too. Turns out, he had a fractured paw and needed treatment. They helped with that. They found James temporary housing, then set him up with counseling. He went. It was hard, opening up, but he kept going because Shadow depended on him. With a stable address, he applied for jobs. Erica helped him with his resume. He landed a part-time custodial job at a school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. He saved up. He fed Shadow the best food he could afford. Months passed. Seasons changed. James began to stand straighter. He shaved more often. He laughed sometimes. He even made a few friends. Shadow grew stronger, gained weight. His coat shone. Kids at the school loved him. They'd run up to pet him, and Shadow would wag his tail proudly. One morning, the principal noticed the bond and offered James a full-time position, with benefits. "The kids adore Shadow," she said, "and they adore you. You've become part of this place." James accepted, tears in his eyes. On the anniversary of the day he met Shadow, James sat on a park bench, watching the dog chase squirrels. He thought about how one chance encounter changed everything. He had been ready to give up, to fade away. But Shadow, that broken, limping creature, had seen something in him worth trusting, worth saving. They had saved each other, and now James was alive again, not just breathing, living. He had purpose. He had stability. He even started volunteering, speaking to other homeless vets, sharing his story. He'd say, "Sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, the universe throws you a second chance." Mine had 4 legs and a wagging tail. Would you like me to continue this story to 3,500 words, or begin another one in the same theme? He often walked through the neighborhood now without shame. People greeted him by name. Children would wave at him from front yards or school buses. Shadow trotted proudly beside him, no longer the trembling skin-and-bones stray he once was, but a healthy, alert dog with bright eyes and a wagging tail. They became something of a fixture in the community. The old man and his dog. At the grocery store, the cashier would sneak Shadow treats. At the park, joggers would stop to say hello. Parents who had once hurried their kids along past James now stopped to chat. It wasn't that people had suddenly become kinder. It was that James had become visible again. Shadow had bridged that gap. Where once people saw only a homeless man, now they saw a story, a bond, a life rebuilt. James started documenting their journey in a small notebook Erica had given him. He wrote about the freezing night he met Shadow, about the first time they shared food, about the day Shadow barked at a man who had tried to steal James's bag, about how that bark had shaken James too, not from fear, but from realizing someone was protecting him again. For the first time in so long, someone, even a dog, cared if he was okay. One evening, as the sun dipped low and golden light washed over the park, James sat on the grass with Shadow at his side. A boy approached, maybe 10 years old, holding a leash and crying. His dog had slipped away, chasing a squirrel. Shadow stood and sniffed the air, ears alert. James knelt beside the boy. "What's her name?" "Daisy," the boy sniffled. "She's small and white and really fast." James nodded. "We'll help find her." Shadow seemed to understand. Together they circled the block. James called out. The boy called out. Shadow led the way, nose to the ground. 30 minutes later, they found Daisy tangled in a bush near a parking lot, whimpering. The boy screamed with joy, hugging her tightly. He turned to James and said, "You and your dog are heroes." James smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "He's the hero. I just follow him." Moments like these became more frequent. Shadow seemed to attract people who needed comfort. Elderly folks in the park would pet him and tell stories from their youth. Children with shy smiles would crouch and giggle as he licked their hands. One day, a local journalist noticed them and asked to do a story. "Not about just being homeless," she said, "about how a dog helped change a man's life." James agreed. The article ran with the headline, "From War to the Streets and Back Again, Thanks to a Dog Named Shadow." The response was overwhelming. People sent letters, thanking him for his service. Some offered donations. One man sent a brand-new winter coat. A woman donated a custom dog bed. But most importantly, veterans reached out. Emails and letters from men and women who had also fallen through the cracks. James read every one. He began volunteering more, speaking at shelters, visiting VA hospitals with Shadow. He talked not just about war, but about healing, about trust, about second chances. Shadow became an unofficial therapy dog. He'd nuzzle veterans who sat silent in wheelchairs. He'd rest his head in the lap of those who couldn't speak. His presence did what words couldn't. Then, one winter night, Shadow didn't eat. James noticed immediately. He took him to the vet, panic rising. Tests were run. Shadow had a tumor. It was operable, the vet said, but risky. James didn't hesitate. He used his savings. Erica helped set up a fundraiser. The community chipped in. The surgery went well, but recovery was slow. James stayed by Shadow's side every moment. He read to him, talked to him, held his paw when the pain meds wore off. Weeks passed. Slowly, Shadow began to heal, and when he finally stood on his own again, tail wagging weakly, James wept. Not out of sadness, but because he realized how deep their bond had become. He hadn't just saved Shadow that cold winter day. Shadow had saved him over and over again. The school where James worked created a mural. It showed a silhouette of a man and his dog beneath a starry sky. Beneath it were the words, "Sometimes angels come in fur." James never sought attention. He didn't care about accolades. But he knew that if his story, their story, could remind one person to look twice at a homeless man, to offer kindness instead of judgment, to see a soul instead of a stereotype, then it was worth telling. He often returned to the spot outside the abandoned convenience store, not to relive the pain, but to remember, to remind himself how far they'd come. Shadow would sniff the familiar ground, then nudge James's hand as if to say, "We're not there anymore." And they weren't. James now had a small apartment, a modest life, but it was his. He paid the bills. He cooked meals. He had a bed, a bookshelf, a warm place for Shadow to sleep. He even started drawing again, sketching portraits of Shadow, of the city, of people he met. One of his drawings, of Shadow looking into the distance, won a small contest and was displayed in the community center. Children who used to be afraid of dogs now asked their parents for one just like Shadow. Veterans who had once lost hope reached out to James for advice. He always said the same thing: "You don't need to have it all figured out. Just take the next step. And if you're lucky, maybe a stray will find you, and you'll take that step together." Years later, when Shadow's muzzle turned gray and his pace slowed, James stayed by his side, just as Shadow had stayed by his. And when the day came, the day Shadow laid his head in James's lap for the last time, eyes full of peace, James held him and whispered, "You saved me. You gave me back my life. I'll carry you with me, always." And he did. Shadow's leash still hung by the door. His photo sat on the nightstand, and James still walked the same route every morning, now volunteering full-time, speaking at shelters, petting stray dogs, and reminding people that even in the darkest places a flicker of light can appear. Sometimes it has 4 legs and a wagging tail. Would you like another story in the same style or on a new theme? Subscribe to our channel and leave the comment below.